Silence in the Shadows. Chapter 1. The Move. I never believed in the supernatural. Ghost stories, horror movies, and spooky legends were all just entertaining fiction to me. Nothing more. That was until my family moved into the old farmhouse on the outskirts of a small town in Maine. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a new chapter in our lives after my father passed away. My mother, my little sister Emily, and I were ready to leave the painful memories behind in Boston. The farmhouse was a beautiful, albeit old, Victorian structure. It had charm, history, and plenty of space for us to grow. My mother was particularly excited about the large garden, hoping to distract herself with flowers and vegetables. Emily was thrilled about having her own room, a luxury she hadn't experienced before. Our first night in the house was uneventful. The creaking of the old wooden floors, the howling wind outside, and the occasional thump from settling walls were the only disturbances. I chalked it all up to the quirks of an old house. But the second night was different. Chapter 2. The Unseen Visitor. It started with small things. A picture frame would be slightly askew in the morning, a chair would be moved a few inches from its original spot, or the sound of footsteps would echo through the halls late at night. I dismiss these occurrences as products of my imagination or the natural sounds of an aging house. However, Emily was not so easily convinced. "Mom, there's someone in my room at night," she said one morning over breakfast, her eyes wide and serious. "Sweetie, it's just the new house. It'll take some getting used to," my mother reassured her, though I could see the worry in her eyes. She had heard the footsteps too. That night, I decided to stay up and listen. I sat in my room, the door slightly ajar, straining my ears for any sound. It was around 2 a.m. when I heard it, a faint, almost imperceptible rustling followed by soft footsteps. They were slow, deliberate, and getting closer to my room. I held my breath, my heart pounding in my chest. Suddenly, the footsteps stopped right outside my door. I felt a cold draft sweep through the room, and the door creaked open a bit more. There was nothing there. I couldn't see anyone or anything, but I could feel a presence, something malevolent, watching me. I forced myself to remain still, not daring to make a sound. After what felt like an eternity, the presence moved away, and the footsteps receded down the hall. Chapter 3. The Hidden Room. The next day, I told my mother about the footsteps. She nodded, her face pale. "I've heard them too, Alex. But what can we do? We can't afford to move again." Determined to uncover the source of the disturbances, I began exploring the house more thoroughly. One afternoon, while rummaging through the attic, I found a hidden door behind a stack of old crates. It was small, almost unnoticeable, and locked with a rusted padlock. I fetched some tools and, after much effort, managed to break the lock. Inside was a small, dusty room. The walls were covered in old, faded wallpaper, and the air was thick with the scent of mildew and decay. In the center of the room was a small wooden chest. My hands trembling, I opened it. Inside were old photographs, letters, and a diary. The diary belonged to a girl named Eliza, who had lived in the house over a century ago. Her entries started out normal, describing her daily life and family, but soon took a dark turn. She wrote about seeing shadows at night, hearing whispers, and feeling a presence in her room. Her last entry was a frantic scribble. "It wants me. I can't escape. It's coming for me tonight." Chapter 4. The Shadow. The more I read, the more I realized that whatever had tormented Eliza was still in the house. I showed the diary to my mother, and she grew even more concerned. "We need to leave, Alex," she said, her voice shaking. "We can't stay here." But it was too late. That night, the footsteps were louder, more aggressive. Emily woke up screaming, saying she saw a dark figure standing at the foot of her bed. My mother and I rushed to her room, but there was nothing there. We decided to all sleep in the same room for safety, but sleep was elusive. In the dead of night, I heard it again. The footsteps. This time, they were accompanied by a low, guttural whispering. I could see shadows moving along the walls, shifting and writhing as if alive. The temperature in the room dropped, and I could see my breath in the air. The whispering grew louder, more insistent. It felt like it was coming from inside my head, echoing through my mind. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear, malevolent, angry, and hungry. Chapter 5. The Confrontation. Desperate to protect my family, I decided to confront whatever was haunting us. Armed with a flashlight and the diary, I made my way to the hidden room in the attic. As I entered, the air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to close in around me. "I know you're here," I said, my voice shaking. "What do you want?" The shadows writhed and coalesced into a dark figure, its form barely distinguishable from the surrounding darkness. Its eyes were two burning coals, filled with hatred and malice. "You cannot stop me," it hissed. "I am bound to this house. You will suffer as Eliza did." Fear gripped me, but I couldn't back down. "Why? Why are you doing this?" The figure moved closer, its form shifting and flickering. "I was wronged, betrayed, and now I take my vengeance on all who dwell here." Eliza's diary had mentioned something about a betrayal, but it was vague. I needed more information. "What happened to you?" The figure paused, its eyes narrowing. "I was promised love and life. Instead, I was given death and despair. The house holds my pain, my torment, and now, it will hold yours." Chapter 6. The Escape. Realizing that reasoning with the spirit was futile, I backed out of the room and hurried downstairs. I told my mother and Emily to pack their things. "We need to leave now," I said urgently. "But where will we go?" my mother asked, panic in her eyes. "Anywhere but here," I replied. We grabbed what we could and fled the house, not looking back. We drove through the night to a motel in the next town, our hearts heavy with fear and uncertainty. Chapter 7. The Aftermath. We never returned to the farmhouse. My mother sold it at a loss, and we moved in with my aunt in another state. The nightmares persisted for a while, but eventually, they faded. Emily seemed to recover quicker than my mother and I, her young mind more resilient. Years later, I did some research on the farmhouse. I discovered that Eliza wasn't the only one who had suffered there. The house had a long history of mysterious deaths and disappearances, all linked to the same malevolent presence. I still don't know what exactly haunted that house, but I do know this: there are things in this world beyond our understanding, things that defy logic and reason, and sometimes, those things find their way into our lives, bringing with them terror and despair. As for me, I no longer scoff at ghost stories or dismiss the supernatural as mere fiction. I've seen the shadows in the darkness, felt the cold grip of fear, and heard the whispers of the damned. And I know that somewhere, in the silence of the night, they are still out there, waiting.
Share your thoughts below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and you can check out more videos like these right now.